Now, anterior to the tegmentum here. Anterior to the tegmentum. Anterior to the tegmentum. Let's remove the temporal lobe away. This is the tegmentum. Anterior to the tegmentum, you will see this. It looks like a column. This one, number 17. It looks like a column. And this structure here is known as the cerebral peduncle. Okay, this is known as the cerebral peduncle. Peduncle is a column, the column that attaches the brain to the brain stem. Okay. Now, if you take a look, again, go back to the tegmentum, and if you take a look at this area, then you will see a bump. If we have on the other half, you also see a bump. And this bump is look like a breast tissue. If it looks like a breast tissue, what do we call a breast tissue?
Mammary?
Huh?
Mammary?
Mammillary. Right? A mammilla, a mammillary. And this one, it would be the mammillary gland. Mammillary gland. On anterior to the cerebral aqueduct. Posterior to the cerebral aqueduct, what we have? Corpora quadrigemma. Each individual. Very good. Excellent. Right? Now, we're done with this region, right? And then we're done with this region. Now we're done with this region. Now we move to this region. Now when we move to this region, so again, this is the midbrain, right? This is the midbrain. Now we move inferior to the midbrain, you will see the space. It has a triangular shaped space. At this space here is known as the fourth ventricle. Right? This space here is known as the fourth ventricle. Anterior to the fourth ventricle, you have this nervous tissue. This is the part of the reticular formation. This is a part of the reticular formation. What is this area called? Tegmentum. How about this area called? Tectum. How about these areas? Reticular formation. Actually, the reticular formation is going to disperse all of this, but it's based on where the region it goes. Once it goes to this region, we call it a reticular formation. When it gets into this region, we call it a tegmentum. This region, we call it a tectum. That's the name that is changing according to the area. Again, go back to the fourth ventricle. Go back to the fourth ventricle, right? We have the reticular formation. Anterior to the reticular formation, what is this? Pons. You see the pons. From anterior view, you will see the pons like that. From medial view, you will see the pons like this. Go back to the fourth ventricle. Posterior to the fourth ventricle, what we have? The whole thing is the cerebellum. The whole thing is cerebellum. Now we're done with this region. Now we come down to inferior portion of the pons. We have what? Medulla oblongata. Right? Medulla oblongata. Now we stop right there. We goes back to the cerebellum. When we go back to the cerebellum, you would want to take a look at the cerebellum from the posterior view, right? This is from the posterior view. So the brainstem was situated this way. Anterior, you see the pons, you see the anterior view. Cerebellum, when you take a look at the posterior view, you will see these lobes, right? You will see these lobes and the structure in the middle. These lobes called the lateral lobe. These lobes called the lateral lobe. This structure is looked like a worm, then we call it a vermis. Lateral lobe, vermis. Now, if you take a look at the lateral lobe, you will see the cut right here and right here. This deep cut horizontally, this is called a primary fissure. Right? This is a primary fissure. The primary fissure divides the lateral lobe into the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe, which is the lobe above the primary fissure called the anterior lobe. The lobe that below the primary fissure is called the posterior lobe. Now you tilt it down to look from the inferior view. From the inferior view, you still see what are these lobes?
The lateral?
Lateral lobe. What is this?
Inferior? Inferior?
No.
Or posterior, excuse me.
Posterior. How about this? Anterior. Very good. Now you see another two lobes, this lobe. This is called the tonsil or the tonsillar lobe. Tonsil or tonsillar lobe. Right? Now, inferior to the tonsillar lobe or tonsil, you have these lobes. You have these lobes. This is known as the flocculus or floccular lobe. Okay? Tonsil, holding lateral lobe. Part is the posterior lobe. Tonsil or tonsillar lobe. Floccular lobe or flocculus. Right? Structure in between the floccular or flocculus. This structure, you see the separation line? This structure is known as a nodule or nodular lobe. Now we combine the flocculus up on the bottom. We combine the flocculus and the nodule. We call it a floccular nodular lobe. Floccular nodular lobe. Okay? Now, when it was in the midbrain, what is this called? This column called? What is the big brain called? Cerebrum. Right? Cerebrum. And this column connects the cerebrum into the brainstem. What we call it? Cerebral peduncle. Right? This column connects the brain to the brainstem, and we call it cerebral peduncle. Now, what are these holding called? Cerebellum. This column connects the cerebellum to the brainstem. If we connect the cerebellum to the brainstem, what do we call this? Cerebellar peduncle. Very good. Cerebellar peduncle. Big brain called cerebrum. This column connects the cerebrum to the brainstem, what we call cerebral peduncle. Little brain, known as the cerebellum. This column connects the cerebellum to the brainstem called the cerebellar peduncle. That's done on the surface of the cerebellum. Now it's time to split the cerebellum and take a look from the medial surface. On the medial surface, just only one structure that you asked to learn from. See this line here. It's a white matter, and it's known as the arborvitae. This is the arborvitae. That's all the brains and brainstem. Let's take a look. This one has been removed in the middle of the brain. Right? If you put this back, okay, this will. Right? This is, what is this? Insula, right? That is an insula. What are the structures? The whole structure is a thalamus. Why we see the thalamus very little in here? Because the phonics, right? Because the phonics obstruct it, so we cannot see the whole thing like this. Now we remove the whole thalamus out of the brain, and then you will see the thalamus look like this. Now, if you split the thalamus, if you split the thalamus and you take a look on the medial view, does it look like this? Yeah, it looks like this, right? Right here. Now, when you take a look right in the middle structure of the thalamus, you will see this structure. This structure. And that structure corresponds to this structure here. And this structure in between the thalamus. If in between something, what do we call this? The word? In between the state, what do we? Inter. Now this one in between the thalamus, what we call it? Interthalamic. Interthalamic. Now, what do you call an envelope that you just peel it and stick close? Adhesive envelope, right? Yeah, you just peel it and stick close. That adhesive envelope. Now, because this interthalamic, it stick the two thalami together, we call it interthalamic adhesion. Okay? Interthalamic adhesion. It adheres the two thalami together. And from the medial view, you will see it look like this. Okay? From the intact view, you will see the structure like this. These are the interthalamic adhesion.
So, would it be that I was in the wrong spot?
So when you study, not just only the half split, but the whole. Let's take a look at this one. We say that this is the optic nerve, right? Where the optic nerve cross is the optic chiasm. Optic chiasm, this is a whole structure, you see like that. How about the split structure? You see like this. Optic chiasm. Optic chiasm. Now, anterior to optic chiasm, anterior, inferior to optic chiasm. What do we have this one? The infundibulum. Right? From this view, this is the infundibulum of pituitary stalk. From this view, the infundibulum of pituitary stalk. Now, we say we have two bumps deep into here. And we have two bumps deep into here. What is appear to you? What it looks like? It looks like a breast tissue.
Oh,
This is
there.
only one here. Yeah, this is a mammillary gland. Okay. And from the posterior, what is this column connect? Cerebral, peduncle, cerebral, peduncle. Now from the posterior view, and this is the posterior view. This is the posterior view. What's the whole structure called? Yeah, something quadrant.
Reticular.
Corpora quadrigemina. Corpora quadrigemina. On this side we have to remove, but we still have these two. Right? This is corpora quadrigemina. How about this? Superior? Superior colliculus. How about this? Inferior colliculus. How about this one? What I want to do is
The whole area?
what is this area belong to? About the thalamus, it's called
Epi.
epithalamus. And how about this structure? What it looks like is a pine seed, right? So it's a pineal gland. How about this structure? How about this one? That's a pineal gland. You see, that's why we keep asking you to look at a different model, because it appears differently. So the pineal gland on this model look like this, the pineal gland on this model look like this. It's still pineal gland. And now we comes to the again, go back. We have the optic nerve, optic chiasm, where they cross only, then optic tract. Right? Inferior to optic chiasm, we have the pituitary stalk or infundibulum. Infundibulum. Then we have the two cerebral peduncle. The whole areas between these are the midbrain. These whole areas is called the midbrain.
So if the sticker was put on there, it'd be a midbrain, not the...
Look at the particular structure first. Let's say if the sticker put on this one, look for the cerebral peduncle first. If you don't have the cerebral peduncle, then look for the midbrain. Put in another word, in the midbrain, right? Within the midbrain region, you will find the cerebral peduncle. You will find the infundibulum. You will find the mammillary glands. You will find the optic tract. You will find the optic chiasm, but not the optic nerve. You want to put it that way. Still in the midbrain. Still in the midbrain. On the posterior aspect of the midbrain, you will find the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. Now it comes to this one is the optic nerve. Now at the junction between the midbrain and the pons, okay? At the junction between the midbrain and the pons, directly anteriorly, you will see the third cranial nerve. What is the third cranial nerve name? Oculomotor. This is the oculomotor nerve. Right here. Still at the junction of midbrain and pons, but from the posterior, here comes the nerve. It comes from the posterior, it wrap around, it swing to the anterior. This one is the trochlear nerve. What cranial nerve is it? 4. That's done. Right? At the junction of midbrain and the pons, two cranial you see. At the junction of the brain and the midbrain, you will see one. Okay? Now come to the pons. On the lateral of the pons, you will see the fifth cranial. What is the fifth cranial? Trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal. That's done. Now come to the junction of the pons and the medulla oblongata. In the junction of the pons and medulla oblongata, directly on anterior surface, you will see the cranial nerve number 6.
Facial?
That is abducens. Keep in that level, move laterally, you will see the cranial nerve number 7, facial. Lateral to that, at the same level, you have the cranial nerve number 8, vestibulocochlear. Now, moving inferiorly, inferior is to vestibulocochlear, you have the cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal. Then we move inferior to the glossopharyngeal, we have vagus. Inferior to the vagus, we have accessory. Moving back to the anterior view, this structure, that is the hypoglossal nerve. This is not hypoglossal. Okay? So when you study the brain or the brainstem, try to